Welcome back. Having received multiple requests on how I approach eye lenses, I thought it would be fun to make a video on the subject. The plan is to demonstrate the method I use when painting helmet eye lenses, which I find achieves a great result for how simple and quick it is. It's the same technique I used to paint the lenses on Sultan's Voidwalker Captain. If you haven't seen that video, definitely go check it out. But the focus of this video is on breaking down the method used. Let's paint some quick glowing helmet eye lenses. With the context out of the way, for demo purposes I quickly cranked out a set of helmets using contrast paints to try out different colored eye lenses paired with different armor colors. I wanted to model them after existing chapters, though the red turned out a bit too dark for Blood Angels, and so from left to right we have an Ultramarine Sergeant, Raven Guard, Salamanders, Crimson Fists, and Imperial Fists, which will feature green, red, yellow, pink, and blue lenses respectively. As I outlined in that Voidwalker video, the technique I use to paint eye lenses is quite simple. A bright pale base of the desired color, followed by a high-intensity vibrant contrast or glaze, which is then followed by layering up that pale base in the center of the eye lens. For our pale base colors, for green I'll be using Gauss Blaster. For red I'll be mixing pure red with game color off-white. For yellow I'll be mixing Flash Gets Yellow with off-white. For pink I'm mixing Pink Horror with off-white. And for blue I'm using Baharoth Blue. Though after noticing my Gauss Blaster was effectively empty, I'll be using Army Painter's Toxic Mist instead. For the vibrant glazes, I'll be using Hexwraith Flame Contrast for green, Blood Angel's Red Contrast for red, some Liquitex Yellow-Orange ink for yellow. A quick note here, while inks do work with this technique, contrast paints and their equivalents behave differently. In a manner of speaking, they cooperate more with the effect I'm after, and in my opinion, yield a better result. I'm using this ink here because A, I've run out of yellow contrast, and B, to demonstrate the proof of concept. And I'll be using Doomfire Magenta Contrast for pink, and Talisar Blue Contrast for the blue lenses. So let's get started with our red helmet, which will have green eye lenses. First is step 1, the pale base. With Toxic Mist, I'm aiming to simply create a solid layer of pale green. The neat part about this method is that even if you can't stay perfectly within the lines, the glazing step ties it all down, allowing it to still read as glowing eye lenses. But I prefer to stay in the lines as much as possible, as it's a good exercise to help build brush control. During this step, you might find you'll need an additional coat depending on the armor color and the paint used for the pale base. That's the case here with Toxic Mist, so I'm going in for another round in order to get that solid coat of pale green. And here's the result, a nice solid pale green base. Now on to step 2, the glaze. I'm using Hexwraith Flame. It's just as simple, apply a layer of contrast paint over the pale base. And it's okay if the contrast paint bleeds beyond the pale base you've laid down during step 1, as the tinting effect will help sell the glowy nature of the eye lenses. As for how much to use, there is a sweet spot. Here you can see I use too much. To fix it, I go back in with my brush empty of any paint to siphon the excess so it sits at a more reasonable level. And here's how it's looking with the contrast now dry. Already I think it looks pretty good. But we're on to step 3, layering up the center color. By mixing Toxic Mist with a little bit of off-white, I'm putting down a lighter variant of that pale base back into the center of those eye lenses, to really make them pop. Now this is the step which requires the most precision, but I don't think it's too bad. Just take your time and rotate the model to find the angles which feel the most advantageous. And I think you'll find, over the course of a few squads, this step becomes far less intimidating. For those curious, the brush I'm using is Green Stuff World's Silver Series Size 1. I don't have an affiliation with Green Stuff World, but I do have one with Artel W. So if you want to buy some awesome miniatures and help support my channel, use the link in the description, and I'll get a small kickback. And here it is. Green eye lenses done. A fairly low effort method which requires a tiny bit of precision, but it yields a great look for the effort required. which is a ratio I think most hobbyists can appreciate. And with all the steps shown in detail, I think we can blitz through the others. Onto our Raven Guard Phobos helmet, which will have red eye lenses. The pale base is off-white and pure red. In step 1, I build up thin coats of the pale color until I get an even finish, at which point we're on to step 2. Blood Angel's red contrast, which is glazed over the entirety of the pale paint we applied in step 1. Once dry, it looks like this. Pretty neat. But to make it pop, we gotta push the contrast. Which brings us to step 3. We add in that pale base to the center of the eye lens. And we get our finished result. Boom! Badass red eye lenses. Next up is the Salamander's helmet, which will get yellow lenses. Starting with the mixed flash gets yellow and off-white, which serves as our pale base. Then the yellow ink goes in, and once dry, I layer back up that pale base. Though given how bright the lenses are already, I found I needed to up the ratio of pure white in order to maximize the contrast. With the benefit of hindsight, I think it would be interesting to do another layer of yellow ink before moving on to this step, to further darken the lenses so it looks more similar to step 2 done with contrast paint, which in the previous examples, you can see casts a darker and richer hue over the pale base. And with the center of the eye lenses brightened up, the yellow lenses are done. Onto the Crimson Fist's helmet, which will be getting pink eye lenses. Like with the previous, we start with building a solid coat of a pale pink. Then comes the layer of Doomfire magenta contrast. And then the center of the eye lenses are brightened back up using that pale pink. In the past, I've done a second layer to this step, skewing the ratio more towards off-white, following that layering rule of mine. The brighter the tone, the tighter the zone, which I do here. But as you can see, I've made what we in the biz call an oopsie daisy. But it's fixed easily enough. Just take your contrast and go back in. And boom, pink eye lenses. In all honesty, the nature of both pale red and pink being so close in hue causes the end result of the red and pink lens examples to be rather similar. But there is a subtle difference, one which will complement different armor colors differently. And finally we're onto the yellow Imperial Fist helmet, which will have blue eye lenses. Baharoth Blue goes down as the pale base. And I'm using Talisar Blue as the contrast glaze. And at this point you get the idea. I brighten up the center with the pale base color. Which brings us to the finished result. And there you have it. 5 eye lens colors done quickly. 5 helmets, which now have a cool glowy aesthetic. And you can use this process with any pale base and vibrant contrast to make glowing eye lenses of whatever color you want. I hope this video answers any questions you guys had around how I go about painting eye lenses. But if you got more, feel free to leave them in the comments. As always, thank you to those on the Roll of Honor, Julius Maximus, as well as my other generous patrons and channel members. Anyways, there are buttons for liking, sharing, and subscribing, so press the buttons you want to press, and I'll catch you in the next one.